Let's see how it goes. Okay, so welcome to my discussion of exploring intonation and discovering student ownership through podcast creation in the language classroom. I don't know if Sophie Schreiber is still here, but I think she mentioned that her school is 20 years old. I wasn't sure if she meant the school within the institution or the institution itself, but Padova here, we're celebrating 800 years of existence. Okay, so very quickly, I want to go through the course rationale and show you some of the literature, and then I'll give you a very basic context of our academic life, and then the course structure, and then I'll show you some participant examples and share some of the data from the questionnaires that I gave. And then hopefully we'll have enough time to look at some of the participant feedback, and then look at the possible implications and conclusions that I was able to glean. So when I was asked to teach a C1 level oral skills course, I had already been teaching at the University of Padova in the language and literature department for 15 years, but in the first year of the undergraduate program, and this was supposed to be at the second cycle level, I really wanted to go beyond formal and informal interactions, which I knew we focused heavily on in terms of speaking. And I wanted to go beyond pronunciation as well and look at not only prosody, but how grammar and syntax play together in spoken language, and then have the students really examine how careful listening could actually help them to improve in their spoken language. So the academic context here in this particular study is first year master's students in the English language literature department or degree. And we met once a week for a 10-week semester for a 2 academic hour lesson. And all of our language courses are blended, or most of them are. And so there's the online aspect and the face-to-face lessons. With these master's students, there were approximately 10 to 20 students per group per semester. The other thing is that most of the master's students in this program are undergraduate holders from the University of Padova, but we'll go into that when we look at the participant groups. And this course ran alongside a corpus linguistics course and an academic writing course. So the curriculum, I really, like I said, wanted to focus on intonation and stress and pausing, and not just on pronunciation. And also they were asked to be prepared for giving academic presentations. I also wanted them to give pitches where they would have to be very, very concise whilst being as persuasive as possible. And there was, of course, our informal and formal discussions in class. So I asked the students to listen to a podcast episode every week, or at least 10 minutes of a podcast episode, because some of the episodes can run an hour or beyond that. While they listened to the podcast episode, I asked them to pay particular attention to pitch and pausing, things like that. The students, they decided to take notes on their own on vocabulary and things. And then in class, we discussed the podcast that they were listening to that week and just kind of the general topics. Then I incorporated academic articles on aspects of second language acquisition, focusing on listening and speaking. Then after that, students were asked to deliver an elevator pitch and then a Pechakucha presentation that was modified for our situation. Pechakucha apparently means chit chat in Japanese. Those of you I saw earlier that there are a couple of participants from Japan. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was what I heard. And the original format is supposed to be 20 slides, and then the presenter speaks 20 seconds per slide. And for our course, I just modified that to 10 slides, 10 seconds per slide. And this was given in 2 sets. So an initial presentation, and then they went back and did some self and peer feedback and self-review. And then they gave their second Petkucha presentation. The final project of the course was the creation of a 7 to 10 minute podcast episode. So I'm just going to very briefly, we saw in the previous presentation with Alessia and Mary that the Moodle was one of the big ones for the online tools, and we use Moodle at Padova, and this is just a screenshot of what the students see. So they have access to all of the course materials and all of the different kinds of tools in Moodle. For example, I send out information to the students. There's, the questionnaires online as well, and then they have access to the Common European Framework of Reference descriptors. So here you can see they have the, right here, there's the podcast suggestions. This is a book, and then that's where I send them. I set it up with all the links and information that they might need. And then these icons are just little forms where they end up sending their work and upload their recordings and videos. This is just a screenshot of what happened this past semester because of the lockdown. This past semester's students, they weren't included in the study because the course had to drastically change because of the lockdown. So when I introduced the podcast to the students, I just came up with this categorization myself and told them to go and explore whatever it was that they found most interesting. So there are lots of interviews, there's lots of topic discussions, there are lots of investigative podcasts out there, and then lots of panel discussions, radio play, storytelling. So whilst they were listening, I asked them to notice pausing and stress and pitch, and they went on to go and they started collecting new vocabulary. And one of the feedback from the concluding questionnaire was that a lot of them felt like their Lexis had expanded a lot in their L2. And then for this past semester, because of the lockdown, I actually had students write just very, very brief summaries just to keep up with kind of the discussion, in the sense, because the discussion on Zoom was so much more labored than our discussions in class when we could see each other face to face. And then what we did in class was we would analyze and reproduce existing podcast excerpts, which I'll show you now. So I used the program called Speech Analyzer to look at, we didn't look so much at the frequency, we just looked at a lot of the pitch variation. And so this is an example of one of the podcast excerpts that we looked at together in class. So, like I said, this is the actual written text of the previous slide. This is an excerpt from a podcaster named Aaron Mankey. He's a professional. He has he produces several podcasts. And I chose just this 1 minute and 18-second little excerpt because he is incredibly formulaic in terms of how he introduces not only the podcast series, but each episode as well. And then with the students, what I had them do was the text is not punctuated at all. And so I asked them to, only looking at the written text, punctuate where they thought there should be commas or full stops to break up the language for maximum comprehension, but also for effect. And I had them also put like an accent to denote where they thought pitch should go up or down to convey further meaning, but also to make emphasis, right? And so which words did they think were the most important, et cetera. And then in the second half here, we actually listened to the original podcast excerpt and then tried to demarcate where the actual podcaster would pause and go up or go down in pitch, and then we would do a comparison between the two. So let's listen just to very briefly to the original podcast.
Our world is full of the unexplainable. And if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay, so obviously he has a lot of production value to his excerpt, but we'll listen to what the students did. So this is one of the student excerpts. And so you can see, obviously, with the frequency, their audio quality isn't quite as good, but you can see with their pitch, there is some pitch variation. And so we looked at things like this, and this is the student example.
Our world is full of the unexplainable, and if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities.
So it's hard to tell just by listening very quickly from one to the next, but there are differences in terms of pitch, where she goes up, where she goes down, and where she decides to pause. Here's another example. So these recordings, I asked them to record their original ideas of where they thought the pitch should go up or down, or where they should pause.
Our world is full of the unexplainable, and if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay. So when it was near the time that they would have to actually produce their own podcast episode, they had about a month and a half. I asked them to answer these questions in a forum message just to kind of help them get going, because when you tell the students that they're going to be producing a podcast episode, it feels incredibly overwhelming for them. So will you be working on your own with a peer or peers? Where will you be recording your podcast, and with what instruments or devices? What sort of podcast will you be producing? What is the name of your podcast and the name of the episode? How much of your podcast will be scripted? Will you be adding music? What application or program will you be using to edit and fine-tune your episode? So this is a screenshot from the actual forum where the students were asked to send in their podcasts. And as you can see from just the title of the episodes, just the kind of vast diversity of interests amongst the students. So they told me it was a Mongolian town, cooking with Joe, food on the screen, a dangerous idea, eugenics in the 21st century, Olivia Colman and The Favorite, your film in focus, graduating in Veneto, jazzy portraits, Amy Winehouse, The Broken Flower of Soul. So we'll listen to just the introduction of one of the podcast episodes the students produced.
Erasmus Blues is a weekly podcast created by Emma
and Anna
to get past Erasmus Blues together and to give advice to those who are about to start the adventure.
Get yourself a cup of tea and stay tuned.
Anna, are you excited for our first episode?
Yes, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to recalling all the Erasmus memories with you. Shall we start?
Sure. I think we should introduce ourselves first.
Oh yes, you're right. So last year, Emma and I took part in the Erasmus project. We both went to England, and I stayed for 9 months in Southampton, while Emma lived in Liverpool for 5.
Yes. After coming back, we thought about creating a podcast to share our experiences with both people who have already been and with those who are about to. Use the hashtag Erasmus Blues to share facts and fears with us on our Facebook, Instagram and Twitter pages. Can't wait to read your stories. So, for our first step...
Okay. This is another forum. So that was from the very first semester that I taught this course, and this is from the second semester. And we've got yet another completely different variety of titles, like What Fools These Podcasts Be, Virginia Woolf and the Similarities Between Herself and Mrs. Presumably Dalloway. Let us discuss Halloween controversy, Wuthering Minds, how important are labels, Erasmus Blues, is culture shock a thing? That was the episode we were listening to before. And then the Youth Corner, how to deal with anxiety, Italian fairy tales, a Venetian fairy tale, The Crab Prince, daily missions, insomnia, take control of your sleep. And then we'll listen to another little bit of a podcast episode.
Hello and welcome to Women in Poetry. This episode will focus on two extraordinary American female poetesses, Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, two friends who both talked about their own personal struggles through poetry and, unfortunately, shared the same tragic destiny, premature death and suicide. Suicides have a special language. Like carpenters, they want to know which tools. They never ask, why build? Death is a sad bone, bruised you'd say, and yet she waits for me, year after year, to so delicately undo an old wound, to empty my breath from its bad prison. This is how Anne Sexton described those suicidal tendencies in the heartbreaking poem Wanting to Die, published in her book Live or Die. Anne Sexton's troubled and chaotic life was well known. In fact, no other American poet had opened up like this about depression before, revealing so many private details.
Okay, so I think there are a couple of things to note is that they not only are they vastly different in terms of tone and topic, etc., but the students really took on kind of the devices used in podcasting that you see nowadays. The first one going into social media, and then both incorporating, the type of music that would match the tone of their podcast episodes.
Amy, sorry to
Okay, I have 5 minutes left, I saw.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So I'll go very quickly into the actual study. So what I really wanted to know was if I could get students to focus on listening, careful listening, if that would actually help with their production of speech. The study was 3 10-week semester courses. And there was a beginning questionnaire and an end questionnaire. The participants, there were 52 total. 40 of those were undergraduate students at the University of Padova. 12 came from other undergraduate backgrounds, and then 50 were Italian, but there were 2 non-Italian Europeans. So I'll just very quickly go through. At the beginning of the semester, each semester, I wanted to know kind of where they would place themselves in terms of spoken interaction, but also spoken production. And half of the students felt that they were at a C1 level here. And I want to remind everyone this is a master's level course. And so students should be more or less at a C1 level, and English is their chosen degree course. Slightly less students felt that they were at a C1 level with their spoken production. And in their feedback, it was because I saw they felt less confident with public speaking and presentation skills. So a vast majority had heard of podcasts before. However, more than half had not ever listened to a podcast in their first language or any other language. And then more than half had already had experience recording themselves in English, but I think this is because a vast majority came from the University of Padova, and I know that we have them record themselves in the first year. So in the concluding questionnaire, many students listen to podcasts very regularly, excuse me, and many of them actually incorporated it into their regular entertainment cycle. They just started to listen to podcasts on their own. A large majority, more than half, felt that it was very useful to listen to podcasts regularly throughout the semester in order to improve their speaking skills. However, it was less dramatic with reading about the process of listening. So the academic articles and the metalinguistic discussions about listening, they found it helpful, but not as helpful as just listening to the podcasts. And then another interesting thing is 83% of the students had never discussed their linguistic skills like this before. I don't know if it was just kind of subtly presented to them or if they hadn't, but I felt that it was a little late for them to be discussing their linguistic skills in this way. And then whether or not they felt that learning about listening actually helped them become a better speaker. More than half felt that it did help, but maybe not as dramatically as actually listening to the podcast themselves. And then whether or not if it was effective in improving their speaking skills, a vast majority did find it very useful. Okay, so I won't go into the participant feedback. I'm sure that the slides will be available to everybody, so you can read that on your own. But I will just end with this last one. This course was a tough challenge because it was so different from other language courses I attended for my bachelor's degree at the University of Sassari. I was happy to finally be able to talk in class, get used to speaking in public, and to have tasks such as creating a podcast from scratch that made me learn something new with ease that I'll find useful in the near future. And lots of the feedback was about gaining confidence, feeling at ease. They use words like, oh, now it feels natural to me, which was really significant. And so what I gleaned from this was that I think having students kind of purposefully with intention record themselves and create content in the L2 actually changes their relationship with the language, and that having them kind of fine-tune their ears to different aspects of speech as a listener can create better awareness, but better awareness of their own speech production. Thank you.
Amy, thank you very much for your really highly inspiring speech, because I could see many thanks in the chat, but also some questions. I've got one, whether it was time consuming for you to go through all the podcasts. This was about this.
It was.
The question when you when you showed us the podcast of the students. So.
So I've been listening to podcasts for a really long time, and I just kind of explored lots of various types as well, just kind of following my own interests. And then when I was asked to teach this course, I thought it would, because I teach another course, but it's for listening and writing. And I always thought it would be interesting to have students become better listeners. Because, one of the things that they say is if you want to be a good writer, you have to read a lot. I think it's the same for speaking as well. If you want to be a really good speaker, you have to listen to how people speak, what's effective, what you find effective when you listen to somebody speaking, et cetera. And so I wanted to kind of incorporate that. But it did take a lot of time. And then listening to all of the student podcasts were really, really interesting. One student actually ended up turning his podcast into a YouTube series that was even animated. And so that was really just nice to see, and see that they were able to take something, their own creativity, and to turn it into something really amazing. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure whether there are any more questions in the chat, but
I see somebody is asking speech analyzer. There isn't a version for Macs. I actually use a Mac at home too. So all of the speech analyzing I had to do at my work computer because it's a PC, it runs Windows.
There's one more. What app did the students use?
Oh, they used all sorts of things. Lots of students just used their phones, whatever devices that they had, and then transferred it to their computers, and then used, I asked I told them they could use Ocean Audio. I'll write it down so you can see. Oops. And then there's also Audacity. Those are two really kind of popular ones that you can use to cut and add music and edit audio. Those are the two that I know. And then there are obviously like really kind of heavy duty programs that you can use on Mac, like Pro Logic, I think, or something like that. I don't use any of that kind of stuff. Ocean Audio and Audacity are very basic and simple. And so I would show the students in class the programs that they could use, and a lot of the students, like I said, in Padova, we in the first year had already shown them how to use programs like Audacity. So some of them had already had experience.
Okay, thank you. There was one more question about evaluation, whether you evaluated the students' production with the evaluation of the course.
Yeah. So what ended up being evaluated was, I said they had 2 Pechakucha presentations, and for whatever reason, sometimes some felt that their first Pechakucha presentation was better than their second Pechakucha presentation. So I had them choose which one they wanted evaluated, and then I evaluated their podcasts, and then there was like an exam discussion that they did in groups where they discussed an audio excerpt that they listened to. And my evaluation, the rubric was based on there was some pronunciation, obviously, but it was based on how well they were able to kind of have variation in their intonation, but also kind of just the pausing that they incorporated, especially the second podcast episode. I don't know if you remember the student who was talking about the 2 American poetesses. I mean, her speech is so intentional there. And so those are the kinds of things that I was looking at when evaluating the students' work.
Thank you. Any questions from here, from the physical room? Okay, I don't know. Again, I haven't noticed any other questions online. So if you can check, Amy, maybe yourself, because I'm not in the Zoom at the moment. I will check the YouTube channel.
Yeah, somebody asked where the slides would be available. I'm sure that at the end of the conference, there will probably be links to all the various slides.
Yeah, I'm sure as well, because there are more questions like that. So once again, Amy, thank you very much for your work, because it's not easy to work with C1 students, and especially they are not that keen on working on their speaking skills because they think that they know everything, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.